put it's CT in front because when I make the groups, it's easier for me to find. Okay. You want to start the
I did.
call, Jim?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Oh. I'm gonna mute everybody for call quality. Welcome everybody. It's Jim and Jory on Monday, May 23rd, 2022. Could be Tuesday, May 24th, where you're sitting, and no telling when it is if you're listening to the recording. And welcome to the Open-Hearted Practice Group. It's a special edition today, and it'll be a little bit out of our normal pattern because we're going to be covering something called the Vortex of Submission, or as I usually say, the Vortex of Submission. And so it's a little bit more content heavy than we usually do because there's a lot to cover, but there's also some practices built in. And depending on how the time goes, there'll be a chance to do breakout groups at the end, but we won't be doing breakout rooms at the beginning this week. So we're going to just kind of dive right in. But it's still important to do some form of self-connection, and we'll do that after we see if Jory would like to say something to check in.
I'm just delighted to look at your faces, those of you that I can see, and also the names that resonate for me of other people I know here. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and thank you, Kay, for letting us know that this is their 39th wedding anniversary. Jory and I just had our 43rd anniversary. Not that I'm trying to compete with you, Kay, but so between the two of us, we have, gosh, what's that, about 80 something years of marriage experience. And so that's part of why I wanted to do this particular class today, because it very much relates to relationships and how to keep relationships healthy and vibrant and alive. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. But let's just start.
And I also want to just comment that it's not just about relationships of people who've been married for long periods of time. It's also your relationship with your neighbor, your sibs, or whoever. Just for that clarity, Jim.
All relationships. Yeah. So let's just start with 2 minutes of silence. You can do your own version of self-connection just to get yourself so that you totally arrive here. And so I won't be guiding anything today. We'll just be quiet together and send some energy for peace to our planet. Thank you. Let there be peace on earth. Yeah. So if you just arrived, we just did 2 minutes of silence. And I mentioned to folks that we were going to be doing things a little bit out of pattern today, more like a webinar. It's an interactive webinar. but we're going to save the breakout rooms. Hopefully there'll be time for breakout rooms at the end of our session today. So,
And that's because we really want to cover a fair amount of practice and information as we go through the vortex.
so I'm sharing my screen with you, as you can tell. And the nickname for this particular class is How to Kill Your Relationship or Bring It Back to Life with Nonviolent Communication. And once I was at a international intensive training with Marshall, and we were all standing in front of the big board where we're putting up our offerings for the day. And I wrote How to Kill Your Relationships on the board next to my name. And then I noticed Marshall was standing next to me. And I said, hey, Marshall, I don't think you've ever done this class with us. Maybe you would like to come and hang out with us today and see what we do. It's at a time when you're not teaching. And he said, oh, how to kill your relationship? I don't need to do that. I'm already an expert at that. And of course, we had a big laugh. And he's right. We're already, all of us, experts at how to kill relationships. We probably all had that experience. And today we hope to share with you one of the root causes of relationship problems. And we're going to do it like I said, we're going to do it interactively, and there will be a handout at the end. So, but it's always a good idea to take notes if you enjoy it. And so we're going to enter this vortex. A vortex, you know, is like a whirlpool. And so the way that we practice is to consider or imagine a time when you heard a demand. In other words, you heard someone ask you to do something and you said yes to their demand without consideration of your needs. And write down just a little brief description of what that was like for you. What exactly happened? What did the other person ask you to do? That's the only part of the story we need right now. What did the other person ask you to do? As usual, we suggest that you choose kind of a minor, low level of intensity observation. This is a practice group, so we're not really attempting to go really deep here. So it could be something like your partner asks you to take the garbage out, or do the dishes, or clean up your room, something like that. So write down an observation when you heard a demand. This moment that you decided to say yes to someone else's demand is what we would call submission. And we define it as a mostly unconscious reaction to hearing a demand. And the pattern is we just disconnect from our own needs and we reactively say yes. And it's because we have some sense of fear of punishment. Maybe there's a promise of reward. Maybe there's a sense of duty or obligation or something like that. And it's deep into us. We started learning this pattern shortly after birth, and it certainly got deeply ingrained in us in school. Because school is very much about learning to be obedient to authority. So the teacher says, sit down over there, do this activity, do that activity. And we're little bitty kids, and the adults are much bigger than us. They have power over us. They have the power to punish us, to kick us out of school, to give us bad grades. And so even as a very young children, we learn to, even though we would much rather be outside playing, we're going to sit there at that desk and write sentences or whatever the task of the day is. So it's very deep in us. Often it's also reinforced by behaviors from our parents or grandparents or even other children's brothers and sisters. It's really deep in all of our social interactions, this idea that someone with more power than somebody else can tell them what to do. And so we learn very young to do this, and it becomes deeply unconscious in us, mostly unconscious. But after today, it will never be unconscious again for you. This session, you'll never quite be able to experience life in the same way, and hopefully that'll be a good thing. When we behave in this particular way, it's what Marshall called a denial of a responsibility. Now, as adults, we are still in this pattern, and so the other day, for example, I got a letter that's laying right over there that said I needed to pay my vehicle registration fee, and otherwise I will be punished by a fine. And so at least they were honest enough to spell it out, the consequence of my misbehavior. And so if I was going to be living out this pattern, I would get out my checkbook and I would say, I have to pay this bill, this $500 bill, to keep my car registered. And that's actually a denial of responsibility because I don't have to do that. And although there could be a consequence if I didn't. And so that's what we're going to explore is what happens if we take responsibility rather than deny responsibility. And so we're going to transform this have to energy into choose to energy. And so you take that demand that you started with and write down what specifically did the other person tell you to do. In my case, I would write down you must pay $500 to register your car. You probably already have this written, but just to be clear, get it as short and concise as possible so that it's the least number of words. It'll just help you to support your own connection as you go through the practice. And write it in this form. I have to pay this bill, or I have to do the dishes, whatever it is for you. Although it's usually unconscious, today you're going to bring consciousness to the threat. What's the or else? What happens if you don't do this? They told me on the piece of paper they sent me that if I didn't pay this, that I would have to pay a fine and could be subject to losing my driver's license. So I have to pay this vehicle registration, or else I'll lose my ability to drive my car and it cost me even more money until I pay it. So what's your or else? And Steve asked a good question in the chat. By the way, what does it does this exercise work if you're making a demand of yourself? It probably does. It's a little bit easier if you make it an external force. It's just a little bit easier to keep things clear based on teaching this class for about 15 years now, that if you have an external threat, it just seems to make more sense, at least the first time you do it. So feel free to do it any way you like. And that's my advice, is to do it with an external source of the demand. Looks like most people are finished writing. So just say it to yourself. Just say this sentence to yourself a few times. I have to fill in the blank or else. And notice how your body feels when you talk to yourself this way. And if you notice something in your body, you can add that to the chat. You might notice physical sensations. You might notice emotions. You might notice thoughts. What's the effect of talking to yourself in this way?
So I see from Kathy, frustration, resentment. Rosa, I notice tense and tight neck. And then worried, resentment, whole body constriction, weakness, powerlessness, helplessness, frustration, anger, tightening of my torso and neck, fear. And I recognize all of those. I imagine as I read them, those of you who didn't necessarily write them all can relate to what happens inside of us when we're confronted like this and make these kinds of choices.
This is actually your body setting off an alarm clock that you have submitted. And it's a way that your body and your heart is communicating with you that you are disconnected from your natural state, which is compassionate giving and receiving. And so now we're going to figure out how to cure it.
Yeah, I just want to also just highlight how natural this is that we would have these feelings and these reactions inside of us. They are serving a purpose. They're actually a gift.
When we pay attention to them, it gives us the opportunity to, Jory and I call it an exit ramp, and we're going to get on the exit ramp from the vortex. If you follow this exit ramp, you never need to submit again. So now cross out I have to and replace it with I choose to. And then replace the or else.
But just in this moment, just to take a moment, Jim, so that you crossed it off from I have to I choose to, and just notice what happens in your body right now, just at this point before we go forward.
You might not even believe it yet, by the way, which is also fine. Just notice, yeah, I think it's great to just notice each step of the way here. Then cross out or delete or else and replace that with because blank is important to me. Where the word in the blank is a need. Let's see if I can make this just a little bit bigger.
Good reason why you say it.
So in my case, I choose to pay the registration fee because freedom is important to me. I want to be free to drive my car wherever I want without the fear of getting pulled over. And that actually contributes to purpose so that I can accomplish things for myself and other people. It relates also to survival so that I can go and buy food at the grocery store and so forth. So I can really see the more that I look at this, that my choice to pay the registration fee actually contributes to a lot of needs. So I'll be quiet now while you consider what needs of yours are satisfied by if you choose to say yes.
This doesn't necessarily mean you will continue to choose, but you are motivated by a need. And this, if you have said yes. And what I see here is care, consideration, support, well-being, love, cooperation and harmony, peace, peace of mind, compassion, contribution, reciprocity, survival. You just notice that these are vital pieces of our being. Safety, security, ease. And notice what it's like in your body when you realize that if you have said yes, there was a good reason that you did. This doesn't mean you'll necessarily continue to, but everything we do in the service of an attempt to meet our needs.
So now you have a sentence that looks like this. I choose to, whatever the behavior was, because blank is important to me. And again, the invitation is to say this sentence to yourself a few times. And then just check how your body responds to talking to yourself in this way.
In this case, sometimes it's helpful to even put it in the past because it is something in the past. I chose to because.
Yeah, so what do you notice when you talk to yourself with this kind of life-connected language? A language of self-responsibility. If you'd like to raise your hand and we could hear from a few people about what it's like for you when you talk to yourself like this. If you don't know how to raise your hand, down on the bottom of your screen, there's a little happy face with a plus sign sticking out of the side of his head. And if you touch that, then there is a little menu that opens up and it says raise your hand. Kathy writes, there's a softening, a willingness, a warmth, a concern, some openness. Similar for me, like when I just slow down and take the time to actually write this check in my imagination. I think I actually did it online, but anyway, to actually bring some quality of consciousness to this activity and to remember, this is like a self-remembering. I'm remembering the good reason, as Jory said a little while ago, it's the good reason why I'm choosing this behavior. I'm not doing it for the state, although they will be the beneficiary of this small contribution from me. I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for my family. I'm actually, as I even say it, I see that I'm doing it for my community, that this money, at least some portion of it is going to go to pay the salaries of other people in my community that work for the motor vehicle department. It's going to maybe pay for roads that make it smoother for my car, and on and on and on and on. I can really see how my little contribution is part of living in community and making life work.
Yeah, so there's good reasons why you chose that, Karen.
Emotionally, this is not as simple as I'd like it to be, because I can identify what need was met, a need that was met by complying with what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
But so the need that I mentioned was inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But by complying, by choosing in order to meet the need of inclusion, I am still bereft. I am feeling bereft because so many other needs are still not met.
Absolutely. That makes absolute sense.
I'm feeling a lot of pain,
Mhm.
even though I, in that moment, have met the need for inclusion.
Yes.
I'm not connected and happy and peaceful.
Mhm. No, it's not about being happy and peaceful. It's about having that acknowledgement or of your own relationship to yourself, that you were doing the best you knew how in that moment. And the clarity now that you wouldn't do it again because it's costly to other needs. If you had it to do over again, the other needs that you're connecting to right now would also inform your choices.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Patricia?
Along the line with what Karen is saying, this thing about meeting my need, what needs are being met, I find that invariably, when I meet one need, I'm giving up another need. It's not a very clear choice. It's so when I'm doing this exercise and I do it as Jim is suggesting, immediately in my head, even before Karen spoke, I thought, yeah, at the cost of blah, 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 blah. So there is a choice in not meeting the request, because the needs that would not be met are greater if I fulfill their request. So there has to, for me, there has to be a pause. There has to be an understanding of all of that, which I can't just do it in a split of a second when somebody is asking me something.
Right.
And I need that pause to situate myself in the entire event.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what this exercise is about, is the awakening. Because sometimes we even intend to meet a need and it doesn't even get met.
Yeah.
You know, we do the best we know how in any given moment. And now what's happening is we're opening up to more awareness by this very practice and this integration of possibility. So yes, there may be some process of forgiveness, self-forgiveness that might also be helpful. But in this moment, we're waking up to a more life-serving choice. Yeah, thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, so a couple of the takeaways so far are one, that we can learn to speak a language of self-responsibility by slowing down and considering the needs that are around and alive in us when we hear a demand. And Patricia did something, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but since I was so finely attuned to where we're going in the presentation, I know where we're going and you guys don't know yet. But she said, when I hear a request, then I have a choice. Whereas when we hear a demand, we often tell ourselves we don't have a choice. And so Patricia also is, and also Karen points out the reality that anytime we behave in any way, it comes with some cost. And hopefully, as we continue to grow in our skills and our consciousness, we make behavioral choices that are the least costly to ourselves and to others and to the environment, to the planet. And that we continue. That's what learning is. We're learning from the missed opportunity to meet needs along the way. So now we kind of go to the second step. We wouldn't want you to if you left the call now thinking, wow, now I've transformed my life, which maybe you have, and all I have to do is choose to say yes anytime I hear a demand. Well, that would not be life-serving, because there are situations, boundaries that are important to honor. There are many situations that I can think of where learning to say no is actually the most life-serving thing to do. So now we're going to play with that a little bit. So first, now maybe you use the exact same observation because you've already transformed it from a demand into a request just by doing this process. But think of a time when you hear a request from another person. Again, you can use the same one or you can use a different one. Again, it's really helpful to choose a low level of intensity. So one that I just thought of is, you know how you do almost anything online these days. At the end, there's a request that you do some kind of a survey. So I'm online, and I maybe I even paid this bill that I was talking about earlier, and then they say, would you be willing to stay on the line for 5 minutes to do a survey? And again, write down the observation. Is that a fresh hand, Patricia, or is that an old hand that's still up from before?
Sorry, it's an old hand. Hold on
Okay.
to my hand.
Second step, notice how your body feels when you hear this request. Or I'm constantly training myself to get out of my head and into my body. I want to honor what's going on in my head. I don't want to disconnect completely from my rational mind and my logic and all those other parts of me. But what I've done, because of the way I've been educated, is I've disconnected from my body. So NVC for me is an invitation to keep going back to the body. The body is the instrument that I've been endowed with in order to let me know how to navigate the world in a way that can be compassionate. So now when I hear this request about doing the survey, I tune into my body. And so I invite you to do the same thing. Notice what you notice in your body. Again, you can notice physical sensations. You can notice just the presence of something as simple as pain or pleasure. You can notice more complex emotions. Just pay attention to the body. And if you'd like to write it down in the chat, what you're noticing, just to report your own observations, like Nataraja did, a sinking feeling in my chest and gut.
a tightness in my chest, a stiffness in my neck. Ah, open, relaxed, curious, checking whether I really want to do it, have time, energy, etc. You're ahead of the game here, Kathy. That's where we're moving to.
Well, what I like about Kathy's answer is that
Yeah.
there's not always a no. Just because someone makes a request, sometimes we get curious and open, and so it's just important to pay attention to the message. Rob sent something in the private chat. I think he meant it publicly, but he said I was in a sleepy state, but all of a sudden I'm alarmed and hyper alert.
And I see Tanya write unease in body, saying I need more info to decide. Yes, beautiful. That there's this opening now to possibility. And then Kay says softening of back and opening of chest. So just to notice the shifting that's happening now. If it's happening for some of you, maybe not, but.
And then again, we follow the body's signals, the feelings, we follow those to our needs. So now this is a chance to practice self-empathy. We're really slowing life down and moving from this previously unconscious pattern of reactively saying yes to slowing down, connecting to the body, and then connecting it to needs. So what needs are calling you? What is your body pointing to? In my case, I notice kind of a nervousness when I think of all the other things that are on my plate, all the other requests that are in my day, and even though 5 minutes doesn't sound like a lot to me, I have this unease and a little bit of anxiety. So I want to protect my time, and I want to make sure that the things I do really contribute to my purpose. What's it about for you?
See in the chat, rest, cooperation, support, autonomy.
I like Kay's insight that it meets my need for autonomy when I hear a request.
Yes, that's what we're moving toward here.
And Rob asks, where is being valued? The whole thing, all these needs are about being valued. But if there's a need that's not on this list and it's something that's alive in you, then go there. Don't trust my list. This is just a list that Jory and I used over the years and keep modifying. And so you trust your own words. These words are just pointers to something that's this living energy inside of yourself. And if there's not a word on this list that fits better for you, then use that.
We all have a need to connect to that we're valued. We are, it's not necessarily even about someone else valuing us, but us valuing ourselves.
And then Ezra asks, is this image available anywhere? And the answer is yes. I'll make sure that I give you an opportunity later to download it.
We'll put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat later.
And I also see an answer to the question, ease, space, efficiency, and also support and contribution toward the other. We have a deep need to contribute. It's not always just about what we do for ourselves. And then transcendence, okay with uncertain outcomes. Beautiful. Yeah. To find that okay about of what is. We don't know sometimes.
Yeah, we actually never know, really. We like to think we know, we like to think we're certain, but the reality is that every moment is a new arrival, as the poet Rumi said. Each moment a new arrival. We never know which guest is going to be knocking at our door from moment to moment. We think we have a prediction. Our brain loves to make predictions, but we really don't know.
We don't know what puddle we might step in next.
So now imagine life from the point of view of the person who made the request and extend your empathy toward them. When they made the request, they were hoping that your yes would contribute to some need that they have. Doesn't mean that you agree with their request. It just means you understand the motivation of their request. So why do you think they're asking you for this? What need are they hoping to meet or contribute to by getting your cooperation to say yes to whatever their request is? What do you imagine is important to the other person? In my case, I think that the request is motivated by information and learning, that they hope by getting my feedback about this survey, through the survey, that they're going to learn something and be able to streamline their process in order to contribute in the future.
We're talking about the good reason, I see Ellen writes, for the good of the community. And Rob. No, that's from before.
I see your question, Thomas. We'll get to it in about 1 minute. We'll just have about 1 minute of space here as people extend their empathy. And notice again how your body feels as you first empathize with yourself and then extend the empathy to the other person. For me, there's an immediate effect on the state of my being when I am living in empathy compared to when I'm living in reactivity. Again, it doesn't mean that I say yes, but it's different. There's a different quality of being. So, Thomas, what's your question or comment?
Being empathetic, trying to guess what their needs are, is that different than just being open to them? Am I, by making these guesses, am I eliminating a lot from where they may be?
Maybe. I mean, for me, empathy is like a support system for openness. If I'm already open to the other person, maybe I don't need to empathize. I'll leave that up to you and everybody else to decide whether empathy is a strategy that would support connection in the moment. It doesn't mean that you say anything, by the way. I really like Marshall's advice. Never think what you say is empathy. The minute we think what you say is empathy, we're off target. Empathy is where we place our attention. In this case, we're just placing our attention on the heart of the person making the request in order to create a quality of connection. And one of the underlying ideas for me about nonviolent communication is that if I'm connected to someone else's needs, then it awakens compassion for me. Compassion is action. It's not just a being with, it's actually an acting on behalf of. So if somebody, if someone, if I'm empathizing with someone and they have a need, then I have a deep human desire to contribute to their need, even if not directly. Maybe I do it indirectly, which will be the next step here in just a second. Does that
Yeah,
help,
and
Thomas?
Yeah, I appreciate you articulated that quite well.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to the slide then and finish this process. So now comes the part of where you engage your imagination and creativity. Your heart and mind has been exquisitely designed. That's a metaphor. I don't know if there's really a designer out there, but maybe there is. I like to think there is. But what I notice is that when I am connected to needs, my mind automatically gets busy about how to contribute to these needs. And so just by asking a question, what's a proposal that you could make that can contribute to all the needs so that you honor the need that's alive in you that you started with, your self-empathy in number 3, but also includes the needs of the other person? What kind of a proposal could you make that would acknowledge both your needs and the other person's needs? Maybe it includes a behavior from you, maybe not. You're free. You're a free human being. So see if you can come up with a proposal that you sense might contribute to all the needs that are on the table.
And just for some clarity, it's not that you have to do anything. You're not necessarily proposing that you would do something, but proposing a strategy for them. And you might want to be part of that strategy or not.
Exactly. Like in my case with the online survey thing, I have a lot of trust that they're going to be asking everybody to do this. They only need a sample of people who are willing to say yes. So my proposal is to trust that they're going to get their answer met by somebody who has maybe more time or spaciousness or inclination in this moment than I do. And I'm going to go ahead and attend to the other things that are alive in me. Alternatively, I could also see another proposal I can make is I could write a letter and maybe make it a personal note to the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles in Maui or something like that, and just share what my experience is. Let them know how I feel and maybe get some connection, but not do it as an online forum. Then the last step would be if you were actually having a a personal connection with the person, which I imagine most of you are not on some computer program like I am in my case. What could you ask as a connection request that would help you to learn how the other person feels about your proposal?
And I see that Rena says, and there may be two proposals as I find spaciousness. Some time in between as I get things done.
And again, refer to your body. Notice how your body feels when you live in a world of requests and proposals rather than a world of demands and shoulds. And acknowledging, as Donna points out, that that we always have a choice. We may not like all the choices that we have, but we always have a choice to say yes or no to any request that we hear.
And just to be sensitive to whether you're throwing an arrow at it and adding some sort of disconnection, because what we're talking about here is moving through this, seeing the other person as a human being, making their choices, and we also get to make ours.
If anybody would like to write an example of a connection request that might be in your own language, the way that you talk in your family culture or in your the business where you work or whatever the context is, how might it sound so that it doesn't sound like some kind of formal NVC speak? How would that work for you? Karen says, simple, direct, easy. Put that one in your back pocket and you'll always have it to pull out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that idea? Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And notice what's implied by this kind of a request. Call it a connection request because as soon as we make it, we become open to receiving the authenticity of the other person. Because especially when you see the rest of the vortex, which we'll go through in just a minute or two, you don't want anybody to submit to your proposal because you'll see the cost in just a few minutes. How is that sounding to you? How are you feeling about that? Beautiful. Any other ideas? That's one idea. How's that land for you? And again, notice how it lands in you right now, even just doing this process. What do you notice in your body? What would you need to change about either the have to choose to or the saying no process to really make it fit for you in your life? Feel free to take all these as rough drafts and clarify how they can help you to navigate the conflicts and the challenges in your life in a way that works for you. Let's just pause here, turn this off.
I also just want to comment on what you say, Kay, here. I'm noticing I have resistance to asking the person, how would it be for you? Because they often make demands. I know this step is important, but stating the reluctance and just to notice that and to honor that too within yourself. And because just like we've often taught, you put that oxygen mask on yourself. And if it feels complete in that moment or will mean more needs at less cost, maybe you don't take that last step. I don't necessarily want to talk and connect deeply with people that I'm passing as I walk down the road or walk. I was thinking of the parking lot at Costco, but I trip over, I do something and I just say, I'm sorry if I knock something over, and I just keep walking. So there's that choice too. And first and foremost, to be in connection with your relationship to yourself at that point of what will meet the most needs at the least cost.
Okay. So thank you. This completes the first phase of the class. So now the reason we start here is you need never submit again. So the rest of the presentation, when we go around the vortex, you can avoid all the rest of the pain and suffering that we're about to expose you to, because you're now awakened in a way that perhaps you weren't awakened before. Now you can choose consciously to say yes to a request, or you can consciously choose to say no. So now you are in a completely different state where you are much more likely to lead a life of liberation. Liberation meaning freedom to choose that which will contribute to making life wonderful. That's the whole point of nonviolent communication. What's going to make life wonderful from now on? Sadly, we might still fall into old patterns. And so we'll go through just to prepare yourself for the inevitable times when you might fall back into old habits. So we'll look at what happens if you comply with the demand. So just now imagine a time when you didn't either say conscious yes, or you didn't say a conscious no, and you actually just complied with the demand. You heard a demand and you did it without kind of in a reactive way. What happens for you? What's the emotional experience? First, again, check with your body and just make a note of what emotional experience you're likely to have if you comply with a demand. And if there's a word that describes that emotion, put it into the chat. Shame and resentment, toxic, regret, irritation and annoyance, frozen, anxious. Yeah, these are all flavors of suffering. And so we're gonna kind of pick it apart, and it usually goes quite quickly in our experience. So we're gonna kind of expand time and slow things down a little bit to see what might be going on in our experience. in my case, and what we've noticed as we've taught this for the last 10 or 15 years, is that the first thing that happens is we want to play let's make a deal with the other person. That if we say yes to their demand, then we want to make a deal that the next time we make a demand of them, they'll say yes to us. But we don't express this out loud. We just expect it. So what's the likelihood of getting what you don't ask for? It's not very high. And so what happens if we have an unexpressed expectation and we don't get it is we will feel disappointed. So, and I'm choosing the form of the word here that ends in ed on purpose, because often this particular emotional experience is experienced as blame. You disappointed me. You didn't give me what I didn't ask for, and it's your fault that I feel this way. So that's not particularly connecting or unifying in terms of relationship. And now I keep going around this vortex, getting sucked in a little bit deeper. And how do you feel when you're disappointed over and over and over again? When one disappoint,
Jim,
Yeah.
Jim, I accidentally pressed close all room, open the room, so people slipped out and they'll be back any minute.
whoops, okay.
Oops. Okay, close all rooms. Close all rooms. See, I have to do that too.
Okay, everybody be back in 55 seconds. A lot of people are probably saying, how did we end up here? We zoomed here.
Oops. Oh my, I didn't even realize I did.
I found myself in a breakout room.
Yes,
I was
my
sucked
bad.
up by the vortex. Oh my God.
The vortex sucked me up without asking me against my choice.
Yes.
Oh, great. Now I have a reason why I did this, to give you the experience. Of
Yes.
What did I miss in the last part before I got put in the breakout room?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll rewind again and push play as soon as I make sure everybody's back.
All these casualties.
Believe it or not, there's still about 10 people who are still in their breakout rooms wondering
Yes,
what the
yes,
hell
yes.
happened. Here they
Yeah.
come. Okay, now everybody's back.
Okay, I wanted you all to know what it was like to be sucked up into the vortex. So now we can
I guess we have to go beam me up, Scotty.
There you go. Okay, so meanwhile, back in the vortex, the question on the table is, how do you feel when you are disappointed over and over and over again?
Resentful.
Ah, somebody said it. Resentful. That's actually the definition of resentment. Is we blame the other person for not behaving in the way that we didn't request that they behave, and we end up feeling resentful. And what's the effect of resentment in how you see the other person? What's the effect of resentment in how you see the other person? Yeah, an enemy image. In other words, now we think the other person deserves to be punished. So you see how our submission set us up for violence. And then given the way that we've been educated, how do we feel after we behave punitively? So think of the last time you lost your temper or did something that you regret. How do you feel? Yeah, ashamed. Yeah. We tend to feel guilt, shame, depression, or anxiety. So now we're punishing ourselves because of our behavior. And guess what that does? Now it sets us up to deserve to submit next time. So we've now done one cycle of submission, and we end up right back where we started, where now when the other person asks us to do something, we tell ourselves we have to comply because we deserve to do that in order to balance the karmic scale, so to speak. Now we must do what we owe them. So then we have this whole pattern where deserve is just built in. This Marshall called it the most toxic part of life alienated communication is the concept of deserve. It's the root cause of violence, as you can see. We submit because we deserve it. We act in violence because they deserve it. And we deserve to be punished. Now we deserve to submit again, and around and around and around we go. And often the experience is it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. Eventually, we reach a threshold. We go one too many times around that vortex. And then we suffer something called perceptual reorientation. These two concepts are not nonviolent communication concepts. I learned them from other teachers. In fact, the root of this whole vortex, Joy and I learned from other teachers, and we added NVC onto it once we learned. NVC just clarified the whole process for us because we could see the power of language to perpetuate this pattern. But once we go across the threshold, then we have this moment of perceptual reorientation. And what that means is now we see the other person as a permanent enemy image in the past as well as the present. They were always this way. They were never trustworthy. They were never loving. They were always fill in the blank with your moral judgment. We dehumanize them because of going around this pattern. And we do that for a good reason. We do it to protect ourselves from this intense quality of separateness and suffering. So why would we want to hang out with somebody that constantly stimulated these kinds of disconnected feelings in us? So I see the good reason we would go through perceptual reorientation out of a protective part of our being. It's just extremely costly. Luckily, there is an NVC-based antidote for every single part of the vortex. I'll go over it really quickly. As you can see, that this is a pretty deep body of work. We usually teach this as a 9-week class, or a whole weekend workshop. And so we don't have time to go through all these other off ramps or exit ramps today, but we at least want to point them out to you so you see what your choices are as you notice where you might be on the vortex. So if you find yourself in the position of making an unexpressed expectation, then you transform that by first noticing that it's a demand that you have of the other person, and transforming that demand into a request. If you notice that where you are in the vortex is this feeling, this judgment that they disappointed you, then you transform that judgment of you disappointed me into the life-serving feeling of disappointment and mourning through a process of self-empathy. Of course you feel sad when you don't get what you don't ask for. Of course. There's always pain when our needs are not satisfied. That's the signal that life always gives us. So a couple of examples really quickly. Like if I have an expectation that because I listened to a friend when they asked me to give them empathy, and now they ask me for I need empathy, and I ask them for empathy, and they say no, then I feel disappointed. So even though I made the request, I'm really feeling some pain, would you be willing to listen to me for 15 minutes or whatever? They say no. I might still feel disappointment in that, but I wouldn't blame them anymore. Instead, I would care for my pain with mourning, and through that mourning, I might be able to back out of the feeling of mourning and find my power to ask another friend for empathy. So I actually am honoring and grateful that they said no to me, because now I have this other opportunity to get some empathy from somebody else that I haven't talked to in a while, for example. But if I don't do that, then I might end up with an enemy image. So there's an NVC process called dissolving enemy images. We will cover it again in a few weeks. Although there's also recordings on our website. Lots of trainers have online resources for dissolving enemy images. And it's even in Marshall's book as well. But the essence of it is that we find a way to humanize the other person by first caring for the impact on ourself, whatever the behavior is that we're responding to, with self-empathy, and then extending that empathy towards the other person and humanizing them, even if we don't agree with their strategy. Yeah, someone asked about the color scheme. The words in black refer to the points on the vortex that are the pain points, the signals that we are entered a different phase of the vortex. The part in red is the life alienated communication pattern. These are, Marshall called them the 4 Ds of disconnection. And the green is the exit ramps, the NVC processes that can get you off of the vortex. And no, there's not supposed to be one atop the deserve, because it's just the extension of the guilt, shame, and anxiety, how we get out of that. So you could actually move submission over on top of deserve as well. Would also work. So anyway, the antidote or the exit ramp for violence is to just stop. Count to 10, take a walk, do 20 push-ups, write in your journal, anything other than the violence. And as you increase your NVC skills, you'll notice the urge to punish arise, and you'll learn to take care of yourself with self-empathy or empathy before you get there. But you basically do your best to stop. And if you don't stop, then there's the beneficial regret process, which we did just a few weeks ago, and we will repeat. There is a recording about that. So each of these life alienated patterns have an antidote, more than one antidote, but this is just the simplest way to do it. And you can even do deep work to work with things like the threshold pattern, but it's probably something that you would do with a therapist or an experienced practitioner to work on things like perceptual reorientation and so forth. The cool thing, then we'll go to small groups after this, Jory, is this quote from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now that you see this, you're more liberated than you were when we started this class, which is just an hour and 15 minutes ago. So you've already, now you will recognize this pattern in a way that you didn't recognize it before. And this increases the likelihood that you'll have more choice. Liberation just means choice. So when you recognize that you're in one of these patterns, then you also acknowledge that you have choice about an exit ramp, or you have the choice to stay in the pattern. There's a great question. How can we differentiate discernment from judging? And it depends on what you mean by judging. There's a distinction that I love between a moral judgment, which is a judgment of right and wrong, good and bad, these dualistic judgments, and a value judgment, which is a needs-based judgment. And discernment is about recognizing that I have a choice to meet needs. And that when I'm in a land of moral judgment, I'm almost guaranteed not to get my needs met or the other person. So acknowledging that that was a ton of data for you to absorb. And because we've taught this class, I don't know, many times over the years, this is our most, the class we've taught more than probably anything else in our career, because Jory and I knew this even before NBC. We know that there are some of you that need empathy now, because you now recognize this and you want some liberation. So we're going to give you a chance to go to small groups, and you can make them for 20 minutes, Jory.
Okay.
And this is a chance to practice the honesty and the empathy part of NBC. And so you might have questions that come up for you. You might have pain that comes up for you. And so see if you can take turns so that everybody gets a chance to be heard. And then mostly what we're suggesting is silent empathy, just being present with each other. It's the greatest gift that you can give to another person is your presence. But if you have a request for like a reflection of your needs or some help getting connected to your needs, then you can always ask, and the other people in your group will help you with that to get connected to your needs.
Yeah, and I have groups of 2 and 3, and I will open them up now. At the very end, there'll be a minute when it'll say, okay, rooms will be closing. There's still a minute to finish up what you're saying. And then you'll come back automatically. There's no need to press any buttons. And with that, I think I got all the equal signs in front. All right, I'll open them up now. Whee, sailing back.
Okay. Love to hear from some people, but before we do that, I want to put some links into the chat for some of the handouts so that you can hang out with this stuff later as well. So when these will show up as files in your chat in just a second. So first comes the needs sheet. These will also be on our website eventually. Still working on that part. And so there's a needs sheet. And here is the slides from today, if you want that. And then I guess those were the two main pieces. Oh yeah, the vortex.
Okay, so I see some hands up. And so how about while you do that, Jim, we'll first go to Nikhil Ananda.
Yep.
Hey, that was great teamwork, Jim and Jory. Great. I just want to say what a great room I had with one person, and I'll let that person if they want to speak for themselves. But it was just wonderful. So I just want to thank them.
Celebrating that. Wonderful.
Thanks, Nick.
And Juliana?
Uh, uh, Please, can you just help me to understand this, Jim and Jory? When, just as you go around the vortex, and after the shame, anxiety, guilt, depression, then there is a deserve, and saying no. So I'm not able to connect how that deserve and saying no. After the guilt, as you go around. There's a deserve and saying no. So how is the deserve and the saying no? How does the saying no the antidote for
Okay.
the deserve?
I'll put it back up again. So I'll see if I can explain it. So it always starts when the way that we teach it, we always start with this act of submission. And then there's this unexpressed expectation that gets generated. Then we have the experience of blaming the other person with disappointed. Then we feel resentment. Then we have violence. Then we feel guilty about our response. Then that sets us up for submitting again. So this would actually be, the link would be from guilt, shame, and anxiety back to submission. But in between, we have the choice to break the cycle with either saying no in giraffe or in NBC, or by doing have to choose to, and transforming the submission into choice or liberation. So does that help clarify it for you, Juliana? So in other words, because I have, because now I'm feeling guilty and I have hurt you. Now the next time that you ask me for something in order to even the scales, if I'm living in a jackal world, I have to say yes. I have to submit. But if I want to break that pattern, then I can either go to saying no or have to choose to.
By the way, I think she fell off the call.
Oh, she's here. I see her.
You see her? Okay.
Yeah, I see
Okay,
her.
great.
But Juliana's Juliana's talking and her audio's not on.
Okay.
Yes. So I just want you to please say no. Just say no in giraffe. Just say one sentence for me, Jim, if
Sure.
you can, just so I get a little clarity.
The saying no was the second practice that we did today. And that was where you hear a request and you start by connecting with your own body's responses to hearing this request.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you extend your empathy to the other person and imagine what need they're hoping to get met through their request of you. So then you have both your needs and their needs on the table. You put all those needs together and you come up with a proposal that you imagine will meet the needs without you necessarily being involved directly. Although you still might be involved, you might just do it at a different time or a different place or so forth. But somehow your proposal addresses both your needs and the other person's needs. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I got it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks for the question. I'm sure if you had it, other people had it as well. Anybody
I'm
else?
not sure if we actually went through the whole vortex, each of the steps, Jim. So if there's time, did we do that?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we went through the whole thing.
Okay.
Go ahead, Patricia.
One by one. Okay.
Something came up for me doing the share, which was interesting. You said during your presentation that the body is like our barometer as to the sensations in our body is like a barometer to our feelings, and to stay close to those feelings. Did I hear you say that correctly?
Yeah. That's a pretty close to what I said. That what you say matches me.
Okay. So what came up for me doing the share is that, when I stay close to my feeling and I have a sense of vulnerability, that sense, because I am living in a power over world and the patternistic society, that sense of vulnerability becomes dangerous because I do not want to show my vulnerability, because I know that I will be the one who will be attacked if I show my vulnerability. So for example, if I'm speaking to you and I'm feeling a little stressed, then my voice will crack, or I can hear in my voice the tonality changing. And when that happens to me, all of a sudden, my connection is to hide the change in tonality instead of trying to understand what is happening.
Beautiful.
So all of the energy goes into do not show your vulnerability, because as my experience has shown to me in living in this world, is that vulnerability is weakness.
Yeah.
And you know that in a group of people, the bullies go for the weak ones.
Yeah.
So one of the most important lessons too is that we put the oxygen mask on ourselves before assisting others. And if you do not feel safe, then you do what it takes to feel safe. And ideally, the things that we're sharing will offer you the skill to be able to take care of yourself and then make a conscious choice whether there's a benefit to connecting or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just to,
that land for you.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, yeah.
And I also want to share that I can remember a time in my life where I was confronted by somebody who was yelling in my face, and I realized as much as I tried to stay present, I couldn't do it. And so I just said, I'll see you later. And then I did the work for myself. And then because it was a family member, I did the work to be able to go back. Now, if it was a guy or somebody in the parking lot, who yelled, I probably wouldn't go searching them out to reconnect. But if they matter, if there's someone who matters in your life, you do want to build that. You want to have that safety and connection. And
that's only if the other person wants the same thing, because if the other person wants to devour and conquer, then there's no possibility of finding connection.
Yeah, and you get the choice.
Yeah.
How much you want to put the energy into it.
Yeah, even if it's a family, even if it's a relative, and God forbid should it be a husband, one should go to divorce court as far as I'm concerned. But that's my husband's dead, has nothing to do with it.
I'm curious, Kathy, since you're a visiting certified trainer, if there's something you'd like to add about this, how you work with balancing your vulnerability and your honesty, and how you use your body, or whatever comes up for you when you hear Patricia's bringing this up. Is there anything that you would like to add, if you're willing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that question of, am I willing to be vulnerable with this person? And for me, it takes a kind of requires that sense of trust of how much capacity do I have in the moment, kind of like what Jory was saying. Do I have the capacity in this moment to be, because vulnerability is my perception. Can I imagine, do I imagine someone can do something to me? Or, if I trust my own capacity to respond with empathy, or respond with an honest expression, or take a move toward protective use of force, then I can be more authentic or vulnerable if I know that, oh, I put it out there and someone responds in a particular way. I go, okay, that one didn't work for me. And so I think there's just, checking in with my own capacity in a given moment and my own willingness, and recognizing, yes, also, how invested am I in this relationship? Am I wanting to create more intimacy with this person, clear the air, withstand some conflict, work it through? Or is this a case where I'm not really wanting to invest my energy and my vulnerability with this person? So for me, there's several layers of things going on in a moment like that. Who's the person? What's the relationship? What's my capacity? Yeah, and then to be choiceful. And again, coming from this place of choice that we've been talking about all night versus a reactivity based on, well, I should be able to do this with this person, or I shouldn't have to, or whatever, but to actually be coming from choice. I don't know. How is it to hear that?
It's really great to hear that, Kathy. Yeah, and I can do it. I can do it consciously instead of what I do is I go into my default is, oh, there she goes again. That becomes my default instead of staying with what is happening and, doing what, looking at my capacity at this moment instead of thinking, oh, all the times that she said that, here we start. There it goes again, there it shows its head.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have my own story about which makes me move away from what just happened.
Yes, when we start judging the judgments, then we go off on this tangent where connection becomes really difficult. Yeah.
Thank you both. And I mean, when you talked about the way that we in our society we conflate or we combine vulnerability and weakness, that's certainly the way that I was raised as well. That to be vulnerable was suicidal. And it's only when we can create some sense of safety in a practice group or in a relationship, and it takes time to build that sense of trust. And I love this new distinction I learned from one of the candidates that I work with, Cheryl Gale. And she has a project called Brave Voices. And Brave Voices is a project that works with survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And from Cheryl's point of view, and I've become a new advocate for this idea, there's no such thing as a safe space, because you really never know what's going to happen. Even if we're here in this group and we've been meeting now for more than 2 years and we think we know each other and it's a safe place and so forth, who knows what might happen? Some new person might arrive and something scary might happen. And so what the distinction that she brought to me was the distinction between a brave space and a safe space. Recognizing there's no such thing as a safe space, but I can build a brave space at choice within me under these conditions that Kathy and you are talking about, that I can choose what's my capacity, what's the level of importance in this relationship and continuing to sustain it. There is, after all, 8 billion other people on the planet. Maybe I'd rather hang out with them and so forth. So to actually take responsibility with ever increasing ability to create a brave space for me, and then to be okay with not doing that. Sometimes even in my relationship with my sweetheart, even after 43 years, I'm scared of her. It's terrible to admit that, but I get scared. I think I confuse my wife for a saber-toothed tiger, And so how then do I climb out of that sense of almost toxic kind of weakness and climb back into creating a brave space where maybe the first thing out of my mouth is, honey, I think I've confused you with a saber-toothed tiger again.
Yeah, and we all have those traumas in us. Some more than others because it was, during your childhood, but, even the guy who screamed at the parking lot, has left this, am I safe kind of thing. So just to acknowledge our shared humanity and give ourselves the same space we would give a beloved child if they got scared. yeah, to treat ourselves with that kindness.
Yeah.
Thank you, you guys. That was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Very,
Thank you,
very
Patricia. And thank you all for being here. We're coming to that part of the session where we start winding things up. We will keep the Zoom line open for those of you who want to stay for the after party. But in the meantime, there's a few links that I'm going to put into the chat. If you just arrived here and you haven't been getting notifications from us, we tend to send something out once a week that lets you know what the topic is and gives you the connection information. And so that's how you can join that. We do record these calls and make them available. And there's the link to get to the recordings. And eventually there will be handouts there as well. I wrote a book about a year ago, and you can buy it anywhere that books are sold. And if you live in a country other than the United States and you want to have it shipped to you for free, there's a bunch of links at thatinternationalshopping.com that have online book sales in various countries, so you can get relatively pretty much the same price with free shipping. Because if you try to order this book from Puddle Dancer and you live in India, they're going to try to charge you $50 for shipping, which is, not really sustainable for anybody. We do all of our work here in the Open Hearted Practice Group on the compassionate giving and receiving basis, also known as the gift economy. And we're not even taking the money directly. We are using the money that you give to us to support NVC projects. So the easiest thing for us is that you just donate the money directly to the Center for Nonviolent Communication using that link that is in the chat. And if you're a United States citizen, you may be able to take a tax deduction for your donations to CNVC. If for some reason,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you do donate it to CNVC or to maybe the Iranian group or something like that, I love it when you send me an email and let me know, because then I get to celebrate. So thank you.
And if you do want to send us money, we will pay it forward to you. We've been supporting, taking the money that we've been receiving from you guys. Some of you sign up for anywhere from $15 to $50 a month, like a subscription basis. We love that, because then it helps us to be able to plan our giving. And so we've been able to support the Ukrainian trainers that have been displaced from their home in order to continue to do their work, as well as the one Russian trainer who's also not in Russia, she's in Cyprus, and a bunch of Ukrainian and Russian certification candidates. So because of your generosity, we have been able to send them literally thousands of dollars over the last month or so. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Next week, we will cover NVC and money. And so if you're curious about this whole idea of compassionate giving and receiving and how it relates to the world of money, we will cover that next week. Some little piece of it. Not quite sure what we'll do yet, but we'll have some fun. So bring your money, or bring your pain around money, or some combination of both. And we will explore that next week. And with that, I feel complete. Joy, anything you want to say to finish up?
Just the sense of partnership I enjoy, and I enjoyed that I got to connect with some people that I've known for long periods of time here, and also new people. And what I will do is I will put you back into breakout groups if you want to stay, and you'll end up back in your own. But if the other people have left, which is pretty typical right about this moment, I'll move you around if you want to be connected to somebody. And with that, I think that's complete. And
see you next week.
Unless anybody else has something to say, we'll just open up those breakout rooms and move you around until you're with somebody.
Aloha, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay.